Hello and welcome. Let's talk about how to set up TypeScript in your Inertia Vue project. There's only a few simple steps that you have to do, so let's get right into it. So here, all I've done is I've set up a Laravel Breeze application for Inertia and Vue. And that's what you see here. This is just a basic blank, default Laravel project with those things installed. The first step to using TypeScript here is going to be actually installing TypeScript. So let's install TypeScript. To install TypeScript, we just do npm install, and we're going to do a -d because it's a development dependency, and then just TypeScript. So now that that installed TypeScript, we need to actually initialize a TypeScript config file. So if we do npx TSC, which stands for TypeScript compiler, and then init, that's going to initialize a TypeScript config file for us. Let's configure the TypeScript config file. So let's open up our favorite editor. So the TypeScript config file is called tsconfig.json. So let's open that up. And we're going to make two changes here. One is to the paths. So when we import our TypeScript config files, I like to use an @ sign to signify where this file is coming from without actually having to type in the full path. And so this will allow that. So the path is going to look something like this. And so this allows us to use the / as like an alias to this directory. The next thing we need to do is set isolated modules to true. And this was a recommendation from the Vue.js docs when using TypeScript. So we're going to uncomment that. Next, we need to rename a few files. The first file we're going to rename is a JavaScript file, and we're going to rename that to app.ts. So right now it's called app.js. Let's rename that to app.ts. And PHP Storm has a built-in refactoring where it'll actually look for any references for files. And so the nice thing about that is it's going to recommend that I rename this in the app.blade.php because there's a reference to it. So I'm going to hit do refactor, but we'll get to that in a second. All right, the next thing that we need to rename is bootstrap.js, and we're going to do the same thing, bootstrap.ts. So now that we've got those two renamed, let's go and check this file that was automatically renamed for us. You'd want to make sure that this was renamed as well. If you're not using an editor that automatically will check for those types of things, so you would have to change this from app.js to app.ts. Okay, let's run the dev server to make sure that TypeScript and everything is running fine so far. So it's just npm run dev. And it looks like we've got no errors, so everything is good so far. Let's continue on. Let's create our first TypeScript file. Our first TypeScript file is going to be created in the JS folder. And we're going to call it user. And what we're going to do is we're just going to export a class called user. This user is going to have an ID, and it should be a number, and the user should have a name, and that should be a string. So let's go ahead and use this user.ts file, this user TypeScript file, and we're going to use it in the edit for the edit profile page. So if we come back to here, so we're just going to use this page to demonstrate that we can pass in TypeScript and so forth. So we've got this user here. We're going to go to edit.view, and we can see there's this update profile information form. And on this update profile information form, we've got two props, must verify email and status. But we're going to add TypeScript props to this, and in order to do that, the first thing that you're going to do in order to tell Vue that you're using TypeScript is you're going to do lang equals ts. That's going to instruct Vue that the stuff inside here can be used with TypeScript. In order to find props for TypeScript, we have to change these parentheses into carets. And then this is a lowercase boolean, and this is a lowercase string. And then we're going to say user TS. This is going to be a new prop that we're expecting. And user TS should be of the type of user. And so that's our user TypeScript file. And remember when we updated the paths, we can see we're using the alias to this file path. So now what we're saying is that this prop must be of type user. And so when we go to use that down here, let's just say we're going to put like the username inside profile information header. We can say user ts dot, and we can see that PHP Storm's already trying to complete this for me. It's got name and ID. And if we put location here, this is not a property. Like this is not, it's not going to know how to get that property because we've just got the user and all it has is a ID and a name. And TypeScript is complaining here because it's saying that we're not initializing these properties. We can tell TypeScript that, hey, we don't need to initialize these properties by just using an exclamation point. So now we can do user.ts.name. If we refresh this page, we're going to see that there's an error. Well, there's an error because we were expecting the prop user TS passed in here, but we're not passing it in yet. So if we go back to edit, we have to pass in a user TS and we have to pass in a user, but we don't have that user yet. So in here, we are going to do let user TS equals new user. And we can set user.ts.id equal to 1. And we can say user.ts.name is equal to Nick. And then we could say user.ts.location equals address. And again, this location doesn't exist, and we can even see that when we're typing in location, it's not popping up here in the IDE. So we're going to get rid of that. And now since we've defined this user TS, we can pass this user TS into here. Let's take a look at our page and refresh. So it looks like there's still an error. And that error is because we need to say lang equals TS here. So now if we refresh, it's working. We need to tell Vue that we're using TypeScript. And now that we're telling TypeScript, user ts.location equals address gives us an actual error from TypeScript. It is saying that, this doesn't exist on the user. It is also preventing the page from loading because there was an error compiling this. So that's it. That's how you add TypeScript into your Inertia Vue project. It's really that simple. There's only just a few steps in order to get that going, and it'll pay dividends, especially if you're working on a team. You can be using these types to be passing these around, and you won't be having to guess on the data structures because the data structures will be defined with all the types. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you found this video useful, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'd really be happy to hear about how you're using TypeScript or how TypeScript has helped you in the past.